Good morning, it's Charlie ZL2CTM. I've received a couple of a couple of questions recently about where I tend to source my components, and I guess some of the common values, sizes, etc. that I tend to use. So rather than replying back in writing, I thought I would sort of put up a quick video sort of discussing where I've tended to source my components from. And again, sort of what values in that. So hopefully this is of use and of interest, and I'll sort of keep it open. We'll just go from there. So in no particular order, in terms of toroidal wire, the vast majority of the small FT37-43 inductors and transformers in the radios typically use 26 gauge. I have two different colours, again same gauge, one green, one red. I find that quite useful for the primary in one colour and the secondary another, just so you can see which one's which. I'm getting a bit low on this colour here, so I'll have to order some more, but like I say, the vast majority is size 26. For the double balanced mixers, not very often, but when we are making those, we get down to 30 gauge. So I do have a reel of 30, but it's lasted for 4,000 years. It doesn't get used very often at all. So 26 and 30, like I say, 30 not used very often. And then the other one which gets used a few times is sort of more like the 22 gauge for some of those higher power circuits. I'm not into massive amounts of power in here. I quite like the low power transmitters and that, so I can get away with under 50 watts quite happily, and my designs never get near that. So 22 gauge seems to work out well for some of those output transformers. So in terms of the toroids, if I sort of make a bit of room here, some time ago I did a mass order through Kits and Parts. Just a caveat, I don't have any association with this particular company, but I was living in the States some years ago and took the opportunity to do a bulk order through these guys. They still provide those bulk orders. For example, in this particular case, it was 10 of these and 20 of those, and it was 25 of these ones. So in terms of what I commonly use for these types of toroids here, occasionally the ferrite beads, not often. So if you were to have 20 of those lying around, that would be fine. I actually ordered in this particular case 100, and I think that should see me around for about 3 or 4 lifetimes at this rate. I don't use those very often. These are the FT37-43s. Certainly use a lot of those. In this particular case I bought 25. I'm probably looking at doing another order of these. As you can see here, with old radios get pulled apart, I just toss back in again what was an old transformer. Sometimes get to reuse them again. Here's a good example of the red and green being used for the primary and the secondary. But otherwise I just unwind them and use them again. But the FT37-43 is certainly a common toroid for the type of radios that I play around with, absolutely. In terms of binocular styles, I've used both here. So I've got the BN43-202. That's the slightly larger version of the BN43-302, which is, as you can see here, it's just a little bit smaller. So for some of those little QRP amplifiers, I'd sort of typically use the 302. But for some of those higher power ones, for me higher power, I have tried playing around with the 202. Just sort of keep down the core losses and any sort of any heat that might build up. So crumbs. If you would have 5 of those and 5 of those, then you'd have more than enough to play around with. Again, these came in sets of 10, which I think were quite economical. The slightly larger FT50-43, so the big brother of the 37. Honestly, don't use these very often. I can see there's a few here which I must have played around with at some point in time. But you know, you've seen my more recent videos. I can't recall the last time I used one of these. So 25 is probably a bit of an overkill, but like I say, some years ago when I did a big bulk buy, it was just a nice easy way of sort of very quickly bulking up the junk box. So like I say, don't use these very often, so how many you may wish to get is OTY. In terms of these Toroids, let me just sort of prop it up there. Right, so in terms of the bandpass filters, have been typically using this size here, so that's the T50-2 and then the T50-6 for the lower frequency range and the slightly higher frequency range. Obviously got 25 there at the time, and you can see there comes 2, 4, 6, 8, Christ, it must be a good 15 or so still sitting in here. So they've been sitting around in there for years and years and years, and you know, when you got them, you need them. That's great. So same with the 50-2. Mainly the bandpass filters are using these. And then I did use for that last little QRP rig, the little tramping one, the T37-6 and the T37-2. So that's the smaller sized ones. Again, back in the day, bought 25 of those. Again, don't use these very often. I may look to at some point build a bandpass filter using these just to see how they perform, but I must admit the bandpass filters I have been using to date have been based on the solid state design for the Radio Amateur. There's an annex at the back that provides some, I guess, some pre-potted bandpass filters, and they all call out the T50-6 or the T50-2. So I've been sort of tending to use those. So like I say, I think it's fair to say really use this sized toroid. And the much larger ones, the T68-6 and the T68-2, very rarely do I play around with these, and in this particular case this would have been playing around with an antenna matcher, trying to match a long wire antenna down to the radio's 50 ohms. So again, back in the day, bought 25 of those, and the vast majority are still sitting in here. So suffice to say, very rarely use those. As you can see here, here's one which has been tapped every probably, I don't know, 6, 7, 8, maybe every 8 turns. That would have been some kind of antenna matcher I was playing around with a while back. So just using the much larger device to cut down on that the core heating. But again, for the small QRP rigs, the actual rig itself, the transmitter and the receiver, very rarely used, if at all, these sized toroids. But like I say, got those from kitsandparts.com. I suspect that's not the only provider of those particular devices, but like I say, back in the day, it worked well for me, and at some point in time I do want to get some more FT37-43s. I am going to order them again from the same company because, you know, I'm happy with what they've provided. I just need to work out a way of getting them to New Zealand because the shipping was pretty horrendous. Right, so that's wire and toroids, so let's put that to one side. SBL ones, so in the past I have purchased these way back when from mini circuits. They are quite expensive. If I recall, it's around 11 to 12 US dollars. At that point in time, I just bought 4 just to play around with. Since then, I have purchased them from AliExpress, a Chinese supplier. They were 2 different price levels. So in New Zealand dollars, they were $12.36 for one. I believe they were supposedly new, and I'll talk to supposedly in a sec. And the other one was $6.51 New Zealand dollars. So it's if you convert that to US dollars, it's quite a bit less. the one batch that came through, and that's the batch which has the very short legs you can see there, they clearly came off a circuit board. So these were second hand. When they turned up, I could tell that they'd used a pair of diagonal pliers and cut all the legs off something. That's why when I've now transferred it to my little board here, they are considerably shorter than the original ones. The second batch I bought for $12 had the long legs and had no evidence of being chopped off anything. I have not had a chance in the last couple of radio builds to test these. At some point I do need to build up a little test rig and just to see if these things are actually working, or especially with the ones that have been clearly second hand, have they been blown. But again, at that cost, I was quite happy to take the risk. In AliExpress, more often than not for these small components, it's free shipping to New Zealand. So for the sake of a few dollars with free shipping, I get some devices which typically cost you $11 US. So if they work, they work. If they don't, I haven't lost too much. But buyer beware would be, I guess, the something to say about that. The other type of mixer that I have bought and have had mixed success with is the ADE-1. In the past I've mentioned about these. AliExpress, there are many of these on that particular website. From what I understand, you'll see a dash, and I'm pretty sure it's a dash 23. I'd have to double check. That signifies that it's a device that's been manufactured to some specific specifications provided by a purchaser. So somebody's been making something, they've asked for a specific type of mixer, and that's denoted by, and I apologise, I've gone off half-cocked with this video, I think it has an additional dash 23. These particular ones that were on the site, sorry about the reflection with the camera of the light there, do not have that. This is an ADE-1, so if that's truly what they say they are, then these are per the mini circuits spec sheet, supposedly. Once again, I have purchased these in the past. The last time I purchased what were supposed to be the real device didn't work at all. Again, they weren't that expensive, so I didn't lose too much sleep. They were $5.80 New Zealand dollars, so not cheap, but again, with free shipping, I was quite happy to take the risk. But again, buyer beware. These are the 4 more recent ones I've purchased through them. Haven't had a chance to play around with them, so who knows. Some other devices here. It's the video amps and an IF amps that I mentioned, that I acknowledge that I've purchased these and at some stage I want to use them. Again, these devices came from AliExpress. I know there are out on the internet from various suppliers from all over the world bogus devices. Again, buyer beware. They weren't overly expensive, these. Again, free shipping in New Zealand, happy to take the risk, but I haven't actually tried these out yet. Right, so that's mixers. Resistors, I tend to buy, I've got behind me a shelf with lots of little plastic drawers full of components, but what I have been more recently doing is buying these bulk packs. So through a New Zealand online website for doing auctioning and that, there's a lot of retailers that sell stuff. So I can typically buy for $5 240 resistors spread across a series of values. So 510 ohms there, 1k, 220k, so all the sort of the standard values. So I tend to buy those in packs, those $5 packs, and then have them in here for a starter, and then I'll transfer them to those little plastic boxes. But they seem to work well. So little quarter watt 1% resistors there. And in the back I've just got some other ones which come from a local supplier here. Just little 10 packs on there. A pack of 8, sorry. Normally sort of 40 cents, so not overly cheap, but I sort of tend to grab a whole stack of those. About 40 cents actually. Same thing with capacitors. So either electrolytic or the ceramics. So again, from that same website, I have purchased these in the past. It's a box, so 15 values, 270 pieces. I can't remember the price of this one, but I do know that I can buy 120 mixed value capacitors from 0.22 to 470 microfarads. So $10 for 120. This one here, it might have been more like 15, I can't quite recall, but again, it was an online site, and I haven't had any issues with these failing. So they've been quite sort of cost-effective way of buying the electrolytic capacitors. Ceramic capacitors also have been buying those in multi-packs. They'll turn up in little plastic bags with 10 devices in each, again for not a lot of money. Crystals are interesting these days. The vast majority out there are the small size crystal filter. I say again crystals, which I understand are not the best for making crystal filters. This bag here is a bag of 100. I paid 20 New Zealand dollars for those, for a pack of 100. Again from AliExpress. I have not.
My apologies, I don't understand.
No, that's the Google speaker. That's right. What was I saying? So $20 for 100 crystals. I haven't tried them yet. The plan is to use them for this build. So we'll make up a little test oscillator. We'll shove these in. Looking at the design, the simple design for that particular crystal filter, not looking to characterize these in terms of parallel capacitance, series resistance, and inductance and the like. We'll just go straight by what they're resonating at. So anyway, I thought $20 for 100 was pretty good. What else we got? So that sort of leaves sort of some sort of circuit boards on that. Right. So been using this one quite often. It's the SI5351 board. Traditionally, I have been purchasing these when I've had trips to the States from Adafruit, and they've worked fine. This particular one here, I decided to take a punt and bought a couple from AliExpress, again that Chinese supplier. This looks, in terms of the layout of the board, exactly the same as the Adafruit one. I do know I have seen on AliExpress the Adafruit ones, but this one here was New Zealand dollars, $8. So $8 free shipping to New Zealand. So I bought a couple of those. The plan is to use this one on this particular build, and fingers crossed it'll work. But again, not a bad price compared with what they are. In terms of displays, again, it's going to use for this one here a 16 by 2 with the serial I2C backpack on the back. I buy these days just through Trade Me, through the online store here in New Zealand, and just support a local seller there, which I've been sort of dealing with for quite some time. Again, so that's where I get that one from. Same thing too with the little Arduinos, little Nano here. Just buy that through the same supplier. So I guess around the world you've got the eBays of the world. Like I say, I tend just to use, because it's nice and simple and convenient, the New Zealand online auction house, which also has the sellers as well. And that's where I tend to sort of get switches. I did buy a grab bag of switches some years ago, which has been sort of slowly whittling down now. But these little ones here, just buy a bag of 5 of those from the same online seller. So I think that pretty well covers it. So we looked at toroids, we've looked at the wire, semiconductors, so the 2N3904s and the 3906s, they tend to come in big long strips, so I can buy say 50 of these for not a lot of money. And I think in the past, I can't think where these ones came from, but it was just a few dollars for 50 or so. And that's basically where I buy those, just buy them in bulk. It's always better to buy them in bulk. You get a much better price, and once you have them, you just put them in a plastic container like this one here. Unfortunately, the label's sort of slightly fading, had to replace those. and then you just got a whole stack of them on hand. Makes it nice and easy rather than have to order them and wait for them to come in. So yes, that's where most of the semiconductors come from. I've had a few come in from AliExpress just to sort of play around with those. Gosh, what else? I think that's all actually, so I might just leave it there. Hopefully that was of use in terms of, I guess, where I'm getting stuff from and the type of numbers I've been using. Any questions, please sing out, and we shall go from there. Cheers all.